What happens when a snap judgment, a moment of casual bigotry, collides with a multi-billion-dollar secret? We're taking you to the world's busiest airport in Atlanta, inside an exclusive VIP lounge where the staff felt they were the ultimate gatekeepers of luxury. They denied entry to a black man in a hoodie, judging him unworthy of their world. They had no idea that in a few short weeks, he wouldn't just be a guest in their lounge, he would own it. Stick around for the unbelievable story of Julian Carter, a CEO who was publicly humiliated, and how he served a dish of karma so cold it changed an entire corporation forever. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was, as always, a symphony of controlled chaos. The low rumble of rolling suitcases, the distant chime of boarding calls, and the murmur of 1,000 intersecting journeys formed the backdrop of a Tuesday morning. For Julian Carter, it was just noise. He navigated the bustling concourse with an easy, unhurried gait, the very picture of a man comfortable in transit. Dressed in a simple, high-quality grey Stone Island hoodie, tailored black joggers, and a pair of pristine Jordan 1s, he looked more like a successful music producer or an off-duty athlete than the CEO of a hospitality empire. That was exactly how he liked it. Anonymity was its own kind of luxury. His destination was the Etheria Sky Lounge, the flagship sanctuary of the Global Wings Alliance. It promised tranquility, premium scotch, and a respite from the human maelstrom outside its frosted glass doors. His first-class ticket on the Delta flight to London guaranteed him access. All he wanted was a quiet corner, a strong espresso, and an hour to review the final details of a deal that would redefine his career. A deal so confidential, only 3 other people on the planet knew its full scope. He approached the polished chrome podium at the lounge's entrance. A woman with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Karen Sterling, Lounge Manager, offered him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile reserved for appraising, not welcoming. "Good morning," Julian said, his voice a calm baritone. "Just looking to come in for a bit before my flight." He presented his phone with the boarding pass and his Amex Centurion card, the mythical black card, as a secondary ID. Karen's eyes flickered from his face, down to his hoodie, and then to his sneakers. Her meticulously practiced smile tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. She tapped a few keys on her terminal, her movements deliberately slow. "I see your ticket," she said, her tone syrupy sweet, but edged with steel. "However, sir, the Etheria Sky Lounge maintains a certain standard of ambiance. We do have a dress code." Julian blinked. He'd been in hundreds of airport lounges across the globe, in far more casual attire than this. "A dress code? I wasn't aware. Could you show me the policy?" he asked, his voice even. He knew this dance. He had lived it his entire life. "It's about maintaining a business-casual environment," she continued, ignoring his request. She gestured vaguely at his attire. "Athleisure, hoodies. It's not really in line with the experience we offer our premium clientele." Standing just behind her, a younger employee named Mark fidgeted, his eyes darting between his manager and Julian. He looked torn, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge his superior. "I can assure you," Julian said, a hint of weariness creeping into his voice. "My hoodie cost more than the suit your boss is wearing, but more importantly, I'm a paying first-class passenger. Your airline's partner policy grants me access." Karen's fake smile vanished completely, replaced by a mask of stern authority. "Sir, I am the manager here. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone to protect the comfort and security of our guests. Your aggressive tone is also becoming a concern." The accusation hung in the air, venomous and absurd. Julian hadn't raised his voice or made a single aggressive gesture. He was a black man standing calmly, asking to use a service he had paid for. And he was being labelled aggressive. It was a classic textbook maneuver, designed to reframe her prejudice as his problem. He saw the other guests in the check-in line, mostly white men in rumpled business suits, staring. Some looked away, feigning interest in their phones. Others watched with undisguised curiosity, a few with a smirk of tacit approval for Karen's actions. The humiliation was sharp, public, and profoundly exhausting. He could have escalated. He could have pulled out his phone and recorded, called a corporate number, or demanded to speak to her superior. But he didn't. A different plan was already forming in his mind, a plan rooted in the secret document currently sitting in his encrypted cloud server. The document detailing Orion Hospitality Group's imminent acquisition of the Global Wings Alliance. Julian simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. He held Karen's gaze for a long moment, his calm eyes memorizing her face, her name tag, the smug certainty in her expression. He didn't say another word. He just turned around and walked away, leaving her standing there, victorious in her small, sad kingdom of polished chrome and prejudice. As he walked back into the chaos of the main concourse, he pulled out his phone and made a call, not to customer service, but to his chief operating officer. "Rebecca," he said, his voice low and steady. "About the Global Wings acquisition. I want you to pull the employee performance files for the Hartsfield-Jackson Etheria Sky Lounge staff, specifically the lounge manager, and flag them for a priority review, post-acquisition. No, don't tell me why yet. Just do it." He found a seat at a crowded terminal gate, opened his laptop, and got back to work. The deal was about to close, and a reckoning was coming to the Etheria Sky Lounge. Julian Carter was not a man given to outbursts of anger. His success was built on a foundation of icy calm and strategic patience. Anger was a fog. It clouded judgment and led to rash decisions. Disappointment, however, was a whetstone. It sharpened his focus. As he sat amidst the cacophony of Gate E14, the sting of the public humiliation didn't dissipate. It crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just another wealthy traveler. He was the founder and CEO of Orion Hospitality Group, a $5 billion behemoth that had quietly revolutionized the luxury hotel and resort industry. His philosophy was simple. True luxury wasn't about opulence or exclusivity. It was about intuitive service, human dignity, and creating a sense of belonging. The experience he'd just had at the Etheria Lounge was the antithesis of everything he had built. It was a cancer in the industry he'd dominated. The acquisition of Global Wings Alliance wasn't just a business expansion, it was personal. GWA was an old guard company, coasting on a reputation built decades ago. Its assets were phenomenal. Prime real estate in every major airport, a massive loyalty program, but its culture was stagnant, riddled with the kind of systemic bias he'd just encountered. Julian saw it as a flailing giant he could not only purchase, but resurrect, remolding it in Orion's image. The deal was in its final, delicate stages. A $2.8 billion all-cash offer that was still a closely guarded secret. The official announcement was just 3 weeks away. His COO, Rebecca Vance, was his polar opposite and his most trusted confidant. A sharp, no-nonsense operator who could dissect a balance sheet with surgical precision, she trusted Julian's instincts implicitly. When his call came through, she didn't question the strange request. She simply executed it. Within an hour, a secure file was uploaded to their shared server. File: Sterling, Karen. Etheria, Sky Lounge Manager, ATL. Julian opened it. Her photo, the same severe face from the podium, stared back at him. 15 years with the company, multiple Manager of the Month awards. Her performance reviews were filled with corporate buzzwords: maintains brand standards, uncompromising on policy, effective at managing guest experience. It was a portrait of a model employee, at least on paper. But Julian knew how to read between the lines. There were also a handful of customer complaints, all quickly dismissed by her direct supervisor. They shared a common theme. Guests, often people of color, described her as dismissive, condescending, and overly focused on arbitrary rules. Each complaint was closed with a note from regional management. Manager acted in accordance with company policy. The policy itself was the problem. It was vague, filled with subjective language like appropriate attire and professional ambiance, giving managers like Karen Sterling carte blanche to enforce their own biases. She wasn't a rogue employee. She was a feature of a broken system. He then looked up the junior employee, Mark. File, Jensen, Mark, guest services agent. 2 years on the job. Young, ambitious, with reviews that noted he was a team player who follows direction well. Julian remembered the flicker of discomfort in the young man's eyes. He wasn't the instigator, but his silence, his compliance, made him complicit. He was a different kind of problem, the kind that allowed the Karens of the world to flourish. Julian closed his laptop. The espresso could wait. The work he had to do now was far more important than reviewing financials. He began drafting a new document on his phone. It wasn't a termination letter. It was the blueprint for a corporate cultural revolution. He codenamed it Project Polaris, after the North Star, a guiding light. The first phase of the project would be a top-down review of all customer-facing policies. The second phase would be a complete overhaul of employee training, focusing on implicit bias, de-escalation, and the core principles of genuine hospitality. The third phase was simply titled ATL Day 1. For the next 3 weeks, as the lawyers finalized the acquisition, Julian worked relentlessly on Project Polaris. He knew that firing the 2 employees would be easy. It would provide a moment of satisfaction, a simple act of revenge, but it wouldn't solve the underlying disease. What was the point of owning the castle if you didn't change the culture of the court? He didn't just want to punish the gatekeepers. He wanted to dismantle the gate. He wanted Karen Sterling and Mark Jensen to see him again. Not as a man in a hoodie they could dismiss, but as the architect of their new reality. He wanted them to understand the colossal scale of their miscalculation. The humiliation they had dealt him would be returned, not with a screaming match at a podium, but with the silent, crushing weight of a corporate restructure designed in part by the very man they had cast out. Their judgment wasn't just poor customer service. It was a career-ending, life-altering mistake. They just didn't know it yet. Back in the serene, climate-controlled bubble of the Etheria Sky Lounge, Karen Sterling felt a surge of professional satisfaction. She had, in her mind, expertly handled a difficult situation. She had protected the lounge's exclusive atmosphere from someone who clearly didn't belong. The man in the hoodie hadn't even argued much. He'd simply left, proving to her that he knew he was in the wrong. "You see, Mark," she said, turning to her junior colleague as she straightened a stack of menus. "That's how you handle it. Firm, polite, and you never let them see you flustered. Our members pay a premium for this environment." Mark Jensen nodded, though a knot of unease remained in his stomach. "Right, it's just..." He had the Centurion card and a first-class ticket. "Are we sure about the dress code thing?" Karen let out a condescending little laugh. "Mark, some people have money, but they don't have class. The card doesn't buy you the right to lower our standards. It's about the bigger picture. Image is everything in this business." He looked like he was heading to a gym, not a boardroom in London. She leaned in conspiratorially. Besides, you saw his attitude. The moment I mentioned the policy, he became aggressive. You have to shut that down immediately. Mark didn't recall any aggression. He recalled a calm, tired-looking man asking to see a policy in writing. But Karen was the manager. She had 15 years of experience. He had 2. He squashed his doubts. You're right, Karen. Good call. The incident was quickly forgotten, becoming just another piece of workplace law. Karen recounted the story to a few other senior staff members during her break, embellishing the man's aggression and her calm de-escalation. She was the hero of her own story, the vigilant guardian of brand standards. This was precisely the kind of decisive management that she believed would finally get her noticed by corporate for the regional director position that was rumored to be opening up. She was meticulous, she was loyal, and she never bent the rules. Life in the lounge continued its predictable, luxurious rhythm. The clink of ice in glasses, the soft hiss of the espresso machine, the polite murmurs of business travelers. For Karen and her staff, this was the world. Hartsfield-Jackson was the center of the universe, and their lounge was its inner sanctum. The corporate entity that owned them, Global Wings Alliance, was a distant, faceless power in a skyscraper in Dallas. They sent down memos and updated the software, but the day-to-day reality of the lounge was Karen's domain. A week later, the first rumors began to circulate, whispers of a major corporate announcement. Most staff assumed it was a new marketing partnership or a change to the loyalty program. No one suspected the seismic shift that was coming. When the official internal email landed 2 weeks after the incident, its subject line was stark. A new horizon, Global Wings Alliance to be acquired by Orion Hospitality Group. The memo was filled with optimistic corporate jargon about synergy, growth, and a bold future. It announced that GWA would now be a wholly owned subsidiary of Orion. The name Julian Carter, CEO of Orion, was mentioned as the visionary behind the deal. Mark Googled the name. The first image that popped up was of a smiling, impeccably dressed black man ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. He scrolled through more photos. Julian Carter on the cover of Forbes. Julian Carter speaking at a tech conference. Julian Carter cutting the ribbon at a stunning new resort in Bali. He was a titan of the industry, a name whispered with a mixture of awe and envy. But to Mark, the face was just that of a stranger. The man from the podium incident had been wiped clean from his short-term memory. Just another nameless traveler in a sea of thousands. Karen, however, was energized by the news. Orion Hospitality Group was legendary. Their hotels were the gold standard of modern luxury. She saw this not as a threat, but as a colossal opportunity. "This is it, Mark," she said, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "This is our chance to shine. Orion is all about premium experiences. They're going to love what we've built here. They'll appreciate a manager who isn't afraid to uphold standards. Dallas was too old school. These new guys, they'll get it. My file is spotless. I'm telling you, this is my track to the regional director role." She spent the next few days ensuring her lounge was flawless. She drilled the staff on service protocols, personally inspected the cleanliness of the silverware, and drafted a glowing report on her team's performance, highlighting her commitment to brand integrity. She was preening for the new owners, completely oblivious to the fact that the most important first impression had already been made. She was polishing the brass on a sinking ship, convinced the gleam would save her from the approaching tidal wave. The name Julian Carter meant nothing to her but opportunity. The face of the man she'd turned away was a phantom, long since vanished from her self-assured mind. The integration of two corporate giants is a messy, complicated affair. It's a clash of cultures, systems, and egos. For the employees of Global Wings Alliance, the acquisition by Orion Hospitality was a period of profound uncertainty. The optimistic memos from on high did little to quell the anxieties on the ground. Layoffs, restructuring, new management. These were the words whispered in break rooms and over-hurried coffees. At the Atlanta Etheria Sky Lounge, Karen Sterling projected an aura of unshakable confidence. She saw herself as an anchor in the storm, a bastion of the old guard's best qualities who would be immediately recognized and rewarded by the new regime. "Don't you worry," she'd tell her younger staff, including a perpetually nervous Mark. "Orion is a top-tier company. They're not going to get rid of people who deliver top-tier results. Just keep doing what you're doing and follow my lead. We're the flagship lounge. All eyes are on us, so let's give them a show." Her show consisted of doubling down on the very things that made her a liability. She became even more of a stickler for the dress code, turning away a wealthy tech entrepreneur in designer jeans and a venture capitalist in expensive but casual sneakers. Each rejection was a notch in her belt, a testament to her commitment to standards. She was completely blind to the fact that the world of luxury had changed. The new elite didn't wear suits. They wore whatever they wanted. Julian Carter's empire was built on understanding that very principle. Meanwhile, at Orion's headquarters, Project Polaris was moving at lightning speed. Julian had assembled a special integration team, led by Rebecca Vance. Their mandate was clear. This was not a merger of equals. Orion's culture was to be implemented, top to bottom. The GWA way of doing things was to be systematically dismantled. Rebecca, now fully briefed on the ATL incident, was astounded by the manager's short-sightedness. She had a man with a Centurion card and a first-class international ticket and decided his hoodie was a problem. What was she thinking? She was thinking what the system trained her to think, Julian replied calmly from his office, overlooking the city skyline. That her job was to be a gatekeeper, not a host. She saw a black man, not a customer. The hoodie was just the excuse. We're not just buying a company, Rebecca. We're performing a heart transplant. The first sign of the coming storm for the Etheria staff was an email that announced a mandatory all-hands town hall meeting the following Tuesday. It was to be held not in a sterile conference room, but inside the lounge itself before opening hours. The email stated that the meeting would be led personally by Orion's CEO, Julian Carter, who was making a special trip to Atlanta as part of his integration tour. A thrill of excitement and terror shot through the staff. The big boss himself was coming, the Julian Carter. Karen was ecstatic. "This is it," she declared, holding the printed email like a winning lottery ticket. "He's starting with the flagship lounge. He wants to see the best of the best first. Everyone, be here an hour early. Full, immaculate uniforms. We're going to make an impression he will never forget." She was right about that last part. Mark felt a fresh wave of anxiety. He spent the weekend rereading articles about Julian Carter. The man was a legend, self-made billionaire, philanthropist, a visionary who had disrupted the entire hospitality industry. Mark desperately wanted to make a good impression. His career could be made in that meeting. He laid out his best uniform, polished his shoes twice, and rehearsed a polite, professional greeting in the mirror. He, like everyone else, was preparing to meet a business icon, a face from the cover of a magazine. On the morning of the town hall, the Etheria Sky Lounge was filled with a nervous energy. The staff stood in neat rows, their uniforms perfect, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension. Karen stood at the front, a little to the side, ready to personally welcome the new CEO to her lounge. She had a brief introductory speech prepared. She felt the familiar buzz of authority. the certainty that her years of dedication were about to pay off in a very public way. At precisely 7 a.m., the frosted glass doors slid open. 2 people walked in. The first was a sharp-looking woman with a tablet, who everyone recognized from corporate headshots as Rebecca Vance, the COO. The second was a tall, calm man in a beautifully tailored navy blue Tom Ford suit. He stopped at the entrance, his eyes slowly panning across the room, across the rows of anxious faces. He looked at the polished chrome podium, the sleek furniture, the bar. Then his gaze settled on the front row. It swept past a few nervous employees before landing, with pinpoint accuracy, on Mark Jensen. Mark felt his stomach drop. There was something unnervingly familiar about the man's calm, piercing eyes. Then the CEO's gaze shifted to the woman standing proudly at the front, Karen Sterling. He looked at her, and his expression remained perfectly, unnervingly neutral. And in that moment, the world tilted on its axis for Karen and Mark. The fog of the past 3 weeks evaporated, and the memory of the incident at the podium came rushing back with the force of a physical blow. The face was the same. The calm, steady eyes were the same. The man from the magazine covers was also the man in the Stone Island hoodie. Karen's practiced smile froze, then crumbled. The blood drained from her face, leaving a pale, horrified mask. Mark felt a cold sweat prickle his entire body. He wanted to be sick. He wanted the floor to swallow him whole. They hadn't just turned away a customer. They had insulted their new king, and he had just walked into his castle. Silence. It was a profound, heavy silence that swallowed the nervous energy in the room whole. Every employee felt the sudden, inexplicable shift in temperature. They watched their manager, Karen, whose face had gone from confident pride to a mask of sheer panic. They saw Mark Jensen, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. And they all looked at the new CEO, Julian Carter, who stood at the entrance, his gaze locked on their 2 colleagues with an intensity that was more terrifying than any shout could ever be. Rebecca Vance, the COO, stepped forward into the silence. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. For those who don't know me, I am Rebecca Vance, COO of Orion Hospitality, and this is our founder and CEO, Julian Carter." Julian took a few slow steps into the room. He didn't head to the front or stand behind a lectern. He walked casually among the staff, his presence commanding the space effortlessly. His Tom Ford suit was the armor of a king, but his demeanor was that of a surgeon about to make a precise incision. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and resonant, filling the lounge. "I know acquisitions can be a source of anxiety. I wanted to come here today, not just as your new CEO, but to talk about what our company, Orion, actually is. What we stand for." He paused, letting his eyes drift over the faces watching him. Some companies are about assets. They buy buildings, planes, brands, and we do that too. But at our core, Orion Hospitality is about one thing: human dignity. That is our product. That is our brand. We sell respect. We provide sanctuary. Whether it's a 5-star resort in the Maldives or an airport lounge in Atlanta, our mission is to make every single person who walks through our doors feel seen, valued, and respected. He began to walk slowly towards the check-in podium, the very spot where he had been denied entry. The staff parted silently to let him pass. Karen Sterling remained frozen, rooted to her spot, her breathing shallow. "The rules of an organization," Julian continued, his voice even, "are like its DNA. They tell you what that organization truly believes. If your rules are vague, they can become weapons. If your policies on, say, a dress code are not specific, objective and transparent, you empower your staff to become judges. You give them a license to enforce their own personal biases, their own prejudices. And that is a poison that can kill a hospitality brand from the inside out. He reached the podium and lightly ran his fingers over the polished chrome surface. He turned to face the assembled staff, his back now to the entrance. His eyes, however, were fixed on Karen. "So, I want to use a hypothetical case study this morning," he said. The air grew even colder. "Imagine a man walks up to this very podium. He is a first-class passenger. He holds one of the world's most exclusive credit cards. He is a member in good standing of every program that grants him access to this lounge. He is polite. He is calm. But he's dressed casually. He's wearing a hoodie." A collective, silent gasp rippled through the room. Now everyone understood. Every employee's eyes darted from Julian to Karen and back again. The public humiliation was beginning, and its architecture was masterful. "Imagine the lounge manager," Julian's voice dropped slightly, becoming more personal, "decides, based on a subjective dress code, that this man doesn't belong. Imagine she tells him he's not in line with the experience. Imagine, when he calmly questions this, she accuses him of being aggressive, a very loaded and dangerous word to use against a man who looks like me." He paused, letting the weight of that last phrase settle. That manager isn't just turning away a customer. She is failing at the most fundamental level of her job. She is not protecting brand standards. She is actively destroying them. She is telling the world that our luxury is conditional, that our welcome is not for everyone, that this lounge is not a sanctuary, but just another place where you can be judged, demeaned, and excluded. He finally looked away from Karen and addressed the entire group. "That is not a hypothetical story. It happened. Right here, at this podium. 3 weeks ago, the customer was me." The dam of silence broke. There were audible gasps, muttered whispers of, "Oh my God," and the horrified shaking of heads. The staff stared at Karen Sterling with a new understanding. Her authority, her carefully constructed image, evaporated in an instant. She was no longer a respected manager. She was the villain in the CEO's story, a living example of everything he had just condemned. Karen's face was now blotchy and red. Her eyes were wide with terror. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, to explain, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? Julian then turned his attention to Mark, whose face was pale and slick with sweat. "And imagine a junior employee standing right there," he said, pointing to the spot where Mark had stood. "He knows it's wrong. You can see it in his eyes. He's uncomfortable. But he says nothing. His silence makes him complicit. He chooses the comfort of obedience over the courage of his convictions. He too has failed. He has failed the customer, he has failed the company, and he has failed himself." Julian let his words hang in the air for a final, excruciating moment. He had not raised his voice. He had not used a single curse word. He had simply, calmly, and methodically dismantled them in front of all of their peers. The reckoning was not loud or explosive. It was quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. The humiliation in the room was a palpable force. Karen Sterling stood exposed, stripped of her authority and her excuses. Mark Jensen looked at the floor, the shame radiating from him in waves. The other employees watched, a captive audience to a corporate drama more intense than they could have ever imagined. But Julian Carter was not finished. This wasn't just about public shaming. It was about demonstrating the consequences of a broken culture and establishing the new law of the land. "The easy thing for me to do," Julian said. his voice regaining its command and control tone, would be to fire you both. Right here, right now. It would be satisfying for a moment. But my company isn't built on momentary satisfaction. It's built on lasting change. He turned to Rebecca, who stepped forward holding a tablet. Effective immediately, Project Polaris is active across all former Global Wings Alliance properties. The first directive of this project is the complete abolition of all subjective dress code policies. The new standard is simple. If you have a valid ticket or membership that grants you access, you are welcome. Period. We are in the hospitality business, not the fashion police. A wave of relief and surprise washed over some of the staff. It was a clear, decisive change. The second directive, Julian continued, is the implementation of a new, mandatory, 8-week training module for all customer-facing employees. It will be called the Orion Standard. It will cover implicit bias, conflict de-escalation, and the core principles of dignified service. It will be the most rigorous training in the industry, and your continued employment will be contingent on its successful completion. He then walked until he was standing directly in front of Karen Sterling. She flinched as if expecting a blow. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Your file says you have 15 years of experience and a deep understanding of applying company policy. It seems you enjoy the administrative side of management. So we've found a new role for you where you can put those skills to excellent use." He paused. This was the moment. Firing her would be a release. He had something far more creative in mind. "You are being reassigned. Your new title is Customer Resolution Specialist. You'll be transferred to our new consolidated administrative hub in Omaha, Nebraska. Your job will consist of processing and responding to every single customer complaint filed against any of our North American lounges. You will read about every bad experience, every rude employee, every moment a customer felt disrespected, and you will personally draft the apology letters. Your performance will be measured by the reduction in complaint resolution time. Your salary will be adjusted to the appropriate level for that administrative role, which I believe is a 60% reduction from your current pay." It was a masterstroke of karmic justice. He wasn't just firing her, he was sentencing her to a professional purgatory of her own making. She would be forced to spend every working day confronting the very kind of dissatisfaction she had so casually created. The prestige, the power, the public-facing authority, all gone, replaced by an anonymous desk in a back office, drowning in the consequences of actions like her own. Tears welled in Karen's eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. Please don't do this." "My decision is not a punishment, Ms. Sterling," Julian said coolly, though everyone in the room knew it was exactly that. "It's a corporate restructuring, and you are being restructured." He then turned to the trembling young man next to her. "Mr. Jensen, you are young. You have your whole career ahead of you. I saw a moment of conflict in your eyes that day, a flicker of decency that you chose to ignore. So I am going to give you a choice Ms. Sterling does not have." Mark looked up, his eyes pleading. "Option 1. You can accept a similar reassignment to the complaints department in Omaha. Option 2. You can enter into a 6-month probationary development program. You will be stripped of your guest services title. You will spend the first 3 months on the janitorial staff in this airport. You will clean the floors, the bathrooms, the windows. You will learn this building from the ground up, and you will learn humility. The following 3 months, you will work directly with the team designing our new Orion Standard training program. You will share your experience of what went wrong. Your input will help us ensure this never happens again. If you complete the 6 months to our satisfaction, you may reapply for a junior guest services position. There are no guarantees. The choice was stark: professional exile or a grueling path to redemption. It was a test of character. Mark was shaking, but he found his voice. "I'll do the program, sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take option 2. I'm sorry. I was a coward. I won't be again." Julian simply nodded. "Good. Your new supervisor will meet you here this afternoon." He turned back to the stunned and silent staff. "Let this be a lesson to everyone. Your job title does not give you power. Your actions do. At Orion, you have the power to make someone's day better, to be a moment of calm in their stressful journey. But if you choose to use your position to make someone feel small, to judge them, to exclude them, you will find that my memory is very long, and my tolerance for it is non-existent. Welcome to Orion Hospitality. Work begins now." With that, he turned and walked out of the lounge, Rebecca Vance following in his wake. He didn't look back. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wreckage and the terrifying, cleansing promise of a new world. The story of the Atlanta Town Hall detonated like a silent shockwave through the corporate structure of the newly merged Orion GWA entity. It wasn't disseminated through official channels. It traveled through the company's nervous system, the back channels of Slack, the hushed calls between lounge managers in different time zones, the wide-eyed gossip exchanged by flight crews during layovers in Hong Kong and Dubai. It became a legend, embellished with each retelling but retaining its terrifying core truth. They called it the Polaris Purge, or Carter's Gambit. The story served as a more potent and effective mission statement than any laminated plaque or HR-approved poster ever could. The new king had made his first decree, not with a proclamation, but with a public execution of a toxic culture, and everyone, from baggage handlers to vice presidents, heard it loud and clear. In Chicago's O'Hare, a veteran lounge supervisor named David, a man who had prided himself on running a tight ship, much like Karen Sterling, found himself staring at his own reflection in the polished black marble of his desk. He recalled, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, the countless times he had subtly discouraged families with young children from sitting in the main area, the instances he had profiled casually dressed passengers as potential problems. He, and thousands like him, were suddenly forced to audit their own professional conduct through a new, terrifying lens. What would Julian Carter think of this? The legend of the Atlanta Town Hall had instilled a new kind of accountability, an invisible CEO perched on the shoulder of every employee. For Karen Sterling, the legend was a stark, daily reality. Her transfer was not to a sleek, modern Orion administrative building, but to a soulless, leased office space in an Omaha business park, a beige purgatory of drop ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. This was the Customer Resolution Center, the corporate septic tank where all the negativity, frustration, and disappointment from the company's vast network flowed. Her new title, Customer Resolution Specialist, was a cruel irony. She resolved nothing. She processed. Her work consisted of a relentless queue of digital tickets, each one a small story of human frustration. Her first few weeks were a blur of defiant misery. She saw herself as a victim, a loyal soldier exiled by a new, overly sensitive monarch. She performed her tasks with robotic detachment, pasting scripted apologies into response forms. The complaints were just noise, the angry words of entitled customers. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a ticket arrived that broke through her defensive shell. It was from a man named Mr. Al-Jamil, an elderly Syrian doctor flying to visit his newborn grandchild for the first time. He had been denied entry to the Frankfurt lounge because the agent was suspicious of his visa and claimed his traditional, though high-quality tunic was not appropriate business attire. The agent had made him wait at the podium for nearly an hour while verifying his credentials, causing him to miss his connecting flight. His complaint wasn't angry. It was filled with a profound, weary sadness. "She looked through me," he wrote. "She made me feel like a criminal in front of everyone. All I wanted was a quiet place to sit. My old bones were tired." Karen read his words, and the carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crumble. "She made me feel in front of everyone." The echo was deafening. She saw Julian Carter's calm, disappointed eyes. She saw the faces of her own staff, their respect for her curdling into pity and disgust. She felt the phantom sensation of the floor dropping away from beneath her. Mr. Al-Jamil's humiliation was her humiliation. For the first time, she wasn't processing a ticket. She was experiencing it. She deleted the scripted apology and began to type, her own words now, clumsy but sincere. It was the first of thousands of apologies she would write, each one a small penance, a chipping away at the arrogant certainty that had been her downfall. Her job was a sentence, yes, but it was also becoming an education in empathy, delivered one painful lesson at a time. Mark Jensen's path was not one of quiet contemplation, but of overt, physical humility. His first day on the custodial crew was a brutal assault on his ego. Dressed in grey overalls, he was tasked with cleaning the public restrooms in Concourse T, the same concourse where business travellers he once served now rushed past, completely oblivious to his existence. He was invisible. He learned the airport's rhythm from its grimiest corners. He learned that the night shift crew, mostly immigrants and working mothers, possessed a camaraderie and quiet dignity he had never witnessed in the sterile environment of the lounge. His unofficial mentor was a woman named Gloria, a 60-year-old Jamaican grandmother who had been cleaning Hartsfield-Jackson for 27 years. She saw the shame in Mark's eyes on his first day and took him under her wing. "Don't you mind them, baby," she told him in her lilting accent, nodding towards the oblivious travellers. "They fly in the sky, but we the ones who keep the ground solid under their feet. There's no shame in honest work. The only shame is in a weak character." Gloria taught him more than how to operate a floor buffer. She taught him to see the humanity in the chaos. She pointed out the anxious soldier flying home, the terrified young mother travelling alone with a baby, the elderly couple struggling with their luggage. These were the people he had been trained to see as background noise, as potential disruptions to the ambiance. Under Gloria's tutelage, he began to see them as the very reason for the airport's existence. He learned humility, not as a punishment, but as a lens to see the world more clearly. When his 3 months were up, he walked into the corporate meeting room for his training development assignment, a different man. The HR executives in their starched shirts expected a chastened, compliant boy. Instead, they got a quiet, confident man with observant eyes. When they presented their proposed training module, filled with corporate doublespeak about synergistic guest flow optimization, Mark spoke up. "That's not going to work," he said, his voice steady. The executives stared at him. "You can't teach empathy with a PowerPoint. You have to make people feel it." Drawing on his own raw experience, he argued for a radical new approach. He proposed role-playing scenarios that were intentionally uncomfortable, forcing employees to be in the shoes of the excluded. He insisted on including testimonials from the airport's invisible staff, the cleaners, the caterers, the maintenance crews, to give customer-facing agents a 360-degree view of the human ecosystem they worked within. He recounted Karen's obsession with standards and showed how it had blinded her. He confessed his own cowardly silence. His contribution was so raw, so honest, and so undeniably powerful that the executives scrapped their original plan and rebuilt the entire Orion Standard module around his insights. He had turned his greatest failure into the company's greatest lesson. 6 months after the town hall, the Etheria Sky Lounge in Atlanta was unrecognizable. The physical space was the same, but its energy had been transformed. The new manager, a calm, observant woman named Sarah, who had been promoted from an Orion hotel property, managed with an open door and an open mind. The staff, a mix of retained employees and new hires, were now trained to see their job not as gatekeeping, but as problem-solving for tired human beings. One rainy Thursday evening, the manifest for the 9 p.m. flight to Singapore lit up with a familiar name, Carter Julian. A quiet electric current passed through the lounge staff. This was the test. When Julian arrived, wearing a comfortable Laura Piana tracksuit and carrying his own roller bag, he found Mark Jensen at the main podium. There was no trace of the terrified boy from 6 months prior. Mark stood taller, his eyes meeting Julian's with a look of respectful self-possession. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," Mark said, his voice calm. "Welcome back. We have your preferred corner suite ready for you." "Thank you, Mark," Julian replied, his expression unreadable. "I've been following your work on the new training curriculum. The feedback has been exceptional." "I had good teachers," Mark said, a subtle nod towards his time with Gloria and his own hard-learned lessons. As Julian made his way to his seat, a small commotion occurred near the entrance. A young couple, clearly exhausted, were struggling with a crying baby and 2 overexcited toddlers who were chasing each other around the podium. The old Etheria staff would have seen a nightmare. The new staff saw an opportunity. Before Sarah, the manager, could even intervene, Mark stepped out from behind the podium. He knelt, bringing himself down to the toddler's eye level. "Whoa, slow down there, pilots," he said, with a wide, genuine smile. "Your runway is a little crowded. We have a top-secret mission for you." He produced 2 small airplane-shaped cookie packets from a drawer. "Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to escort these special cargo deliveries to that table over there." He pointed to a secluded, family-friendly booth. "And make sure they are guarded until your parents give you the launch code." The children, delighted, immediately took their mission seriously. The parents, overwhelmed with gratitude, looked at Mark as if he were a magician. Julian watched the entire exchange from his corner seat. He saw Mark not just manage a situation, but transform it from a moment of stress into a moment of grace. He saw the Orion Standard in action, brought to life not by a manual, but by a young man who had journeyed through humiliation and come out the other side with genuine wisdom. Julian leaned back, a rare, authentic smile touching his lips. This was the true return on his investment. His actions that day weren't just about revenge. Revenge was finite, a single, satisfying clap of thunder. This was something more. This was changing the climate. It was the quiet, persistent, positive ripple effect. A family made to feel welcome in Atlanta, an elderly doctor treated with dignity in Frankfurt, a young manager in Chicago thinking twice before making a snap judgment. His legacy wouldn't be the acquisition of a multi-billion-dollar company. It would be the thousands of small, unseen acts of kindness and respect that now happened every day across his empire, all echoing from a single, quiet reckoning in this very room. He hadn't just cleaned house, he had rebuilt it on a foundation of dignity, ensuring that its gates would forever be open to everyone. Julian Carter's story is a powerful reminder that true leadership isn't about flaunting power. It's about wielding it with purpose and precision. He could have simply fired them, but instead, he engineered a form of justice that was not only fitting, but also constructive. He turned a personal insult into a company-wide lesson, transforming a toxic culture into one built on respect. This wasn't just karma, it was a masterclass in corporate change. What did you think of Julian's decision? Was reassigning Karen to the complaints department a more fitting consequence than firing her? What about the choice he gave Mark? Was it a fair path to redemption? We want to hear your take on this incredible story. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that karma, served cold, is the best dish, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories of justice and real-life drama.